The Specialized Enduro is 20 years old. It first came on the scene in 1999, and in 2019 there is a brand new version of the bike. In those 20 years, Enduro and the Enduro have evolved considerably to reflect the changing nature of mountain biking. We were expecting a new Enduro for 2019 because model years cycle through their time. However, we didn't quite expect the new Enduro to basically be a mini demo. The idea behind the Enduro is to go as fast as possible, and that's clear from sort of the racing itself. You need a bike that can get to the top of the hill fairly efficiently and one that can absolutely haul it when you're pointing down a hill. Specialized obviously recognise this, and the new 2020 Enduro is very much a bike for descending. However, they also say it's very much a bike for getting to the top of the hill too. I'm not sure I agree, but we'll talk about that later on. Now, the main way to go faster when you're going down a hill is to maintain and, if possible, increase your momentum. And that means smooth suspension with a rear wheel that gets out of the way of those square-edged hits that kind of give that jarry, jerky ride and slow you down. If you've been following downhill and enduro bike tech recently, you'll have seen a number of bikes with higher pivot points. This basically means that the rear wheel goes backwards before it goes up, rather than going up and into the face of an impact. This smooths the ride and gives you an ultimately faster bike. There are a number of issues though with a high pivot placed bike. These include dynamic geometry changes, so with a more rearward axle path, the wheelbase of your bike increases quite a large amount when you're going through the bike's travel. Not only does this change the feel of the bike, but you also get a lot of issues with pedal kickback because the distance between the cassette and the cranks changes, pulling the cranks back. Bike manufacturers have mitigated this problem by having an idler pulley over the main pivot, so you see these bikes where the chain goes up and then down to the rear axle. This as well has issues with drag, with maintenance, with all sorts of different things. Specialized new suspension design, which you'll see on the demo and on this new Enduro, they say gives a more rearward axle path without those particular issues of massive geometry changes X, Y, Z. And they've done that by moving the main pivot further forward in the bike rather than up. So that is really the heart of the new Enduro, and that's why the shock is placed low in the bike with a slightly more complex looking suspension linkage. Quite often with suspension design, there is a bit of a trade-off. Bikes that tend to have smoother, plusher, more momentum carrying suspension tend to be worse at pedaling. However, Specialized claim, at least, that their new suspension design, as a happy coincidence, actually improves the anti-squat numbers of the bike. So, in theory, the bike pedals a little bit better up hills. This means less pedal bob, less energy wasted, and more speed. Not only have they worked on the rear suspension, but quite clearly Specialized have worked on the geometry of the Enduro. Previous generation Enduro wasn't particularly up to date. This one is bang up to date if you're looking for a super slack, super long, super aggressive, descent-focused Enduro bike. Alongside the suspension design, clearly Specialized have worked on the shape of the bike. Previous generations of the Enduro weren't particularly forward-thinking maybe in their sizing, especially in the current climate of mountain bikes. However, the new Enduro does take this whole long, slack, low thing to its ultimate conclusion. As we saw with the stump jumper, they have this S sizing system for the sizes of their bikes. It's not small, medium, large, it's S2 to S5 with the Enduro. The main feature of S sizing is that you get longer reaches with shorter seat tubes. And this basically means for a given rider height, there's a number of different frame options on which you could in theory fit quite easily. At 6 foot or 182 centimeters tall, I tested a size S4, which is the second largest one. However, if I wanted to go for a super long stretched out reach, I could have fitted on an S5 as well, because the seat tube only grows a little bit and I could still manage to fit a 150-ish mil dropper, relatively slammed, but I could still get a 150 mil dropper on the largest bike. However, if I wanted to play around on a slightly shorter bike, because maybe that's my preference, I could also have fitted on an S3. I would have had a little bit more seat post showing, or I could have run, say, a 170 or even 180, 200 mil dropper and had a slightly shorter bike that I would maybe have preferred. What this means is I reckon most riders have a range of 3 different sizes on which they would fit. It basically means there probably will be a number of bikes to suit you, depending on what you like. In terms of geometry, let's look at the S4 that I rode, and we're going to talk about it in its low setting. There is a chip that you can change into low or high, but generally speaking, and I exclude the stump jumper EVA that I've got on long-term tests for this, low settings are always better because they're more rad and more fun. So in its low setting for an S4, you get a 487mm reach, which is super long, a 63.9 degree head angle, which isn't uber slack, but it is very, very slack, and a 76 degree seat angle. Across the range, you get a 347mm BB height in the low setting, and this is pretty low for a 170mm 29er Enduro bike. Chainstays come in at 442mm, and this gives a 1274 wheelbase for the S4, which is roughly equivalent to a large. So as you can tell, these numbers are pretty bang up to date. They're pretty aggressive as well. As you might expect from a bike that has suspension effectively shared with the downhill bike and fairly aggressive geometry numbers, the new Enduro is very good when you point it down steep, rough, technical terrain. This is a bike designed to get downhills as fast as possible, and you can see how Specialized have achieved this. When you ride it, the bike is incredibly plush in that early part of the stroke. On loose, chattery or fast impacts, this gives a lot of traction, so there's a lot of control under braking, and you never feel like you're getting rattled all over the place. On bigger hits, the suspension is also very well composed. There's a lot of progression through the stroke, and this means that when you hit those bigger impacts, the suspension controls it beautifully. At no point did I feel that my feet were going to get blown off the pedals. At no point was the ride particularly jarring. I never really hit the bump stop of the shock either. In effect, it's an incredibly well-performing bike on a wide range of impacts. At the front of the bike, that slack head angle with the super capable fork just oozes confidence and control, and this lets the rest of the bike do its job. Specialized claim that it's a really good climber. I wouldn't say it's particularly special. It's still kind of a big enduro bike, so long climbs are going to be a little bit more tiring than a regular trail bike. They did also say it's a mini downhill bike, and I feel that that's a better representation of the enduro. The enduro range comes with 4 bikes and 1 frameset option. There's the top-end S-Works, which comes with the S-Works frame, and that's the one you can buy as frame only too. Now the S-Works frame comes with a carbon swing link in there, and this saves 250 grams according to Specialized. If you buy a regular version, it gets an alloy one. However, you can upgrade to the carbon swing link should you wish. The Enduro Comp comes in at £4,500 or $4,510. This is the entry-level version of the bike. The top end is the S-Works, and this comes in at £9,000 or $9,750. The S-Works frame can be bought for £3,300 or $3,210. That's the 2020 Specialized Enduro. They claim great performance uphill and down. I think its uphill performance is average, but its downhill performance is excellent. It is basically, I reckon, a mini downhill bike. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the little bell to get notifications of all of BikeRadar's new videos.